Jeanette, how did you get there? Like, can you tell us a little bit about your story
Yeah,
and how
absolutely.
you got it involved with Demoler?
Yeah, it was a while ago. So actually, I started in the humanitarian field.
No, no, like so for people that might not know you, like, where are you from? Where were you
Oh,
born? That
yeah,
type of thing. Like, how
that
did you
is
get
also a very interesting story. My parents did the opposite. I was born in Los Angeles. I was born in the U.S.
Yeah.
And then a few months after I was born, they lived in South Central LA.
Okay. So
The
you
Rodney King riots happened.
wow. So L.A. native, Rodney King's era.
Yeah. So my parents had migrated from Mexico to the U.S., with the promise of, prosperity and a better life. First year there, Rodney King riots.
Wow. That's an interesting. Wow. That's an upside down immigrant experience, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they left, as soon as the National Guard came in, because, my sister was 10 years old. My brother was 8. They remember the Molotovs just being thrown. I mean, guns everywhere. It
Koreans
traumatized. Yes.
with the
The rooftops.
rooftop Koreans. Favorite thing about that, right? It's an iconic thing about that,
Yeah.
right?
And it traumatized them a lot. So then we moved back to the U.S. So I grew up in Jalisco, and I mean, the best childhood I've ever had.
So you moved
Only
back.
childhood I've ever had.
You moved back to Jalisco after the riots in L.A.
Yeah.
But this is
This
mid
is
'90s,
92.
mid
Yeah.
'90s Jalisco. It's not what it is today.
Oh, no. Absolutely not.
It was kind of like probably, it wasn't as open as it is today as far as the violence and some of the things
Oh,
going
yeah,
on down there. So
absolutely.
it's like, I mean, I could idealized Mexico of the '90s.
It was a beautiful era to live in. I mean, it was, when they say that a village raises you or takes a village, that's what it was. I grew up with the neighborhood,
Yeah.
back of my dad's pickup truck, just getting, rolling around. And, we got to experience a lot as kids, just running around and everybody taking care of you. You crack your head open, the abuela across the street patches you up, and it's just, very fluid.
Yeah, it's old school Mexico. I mean, Jalisco is back then specifically. I mean, I could imagine safety and just letting your kid go somewhere and come back from the store and stuff like that.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was like it was still there basically.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah, we stayed there for a while, and then my parents wanted to go back,
yeah.
and we went back in 2001,
Okay.
and then September 11 happened. So for me, that was my concept of the U.S. Everything that I heard from my sister saying, "Oh, we left because of these riots," and then me going back the first year, didn't speak a lick of English, I didn't really know how to interpret this new world. And then, the big thing happened. And then I just thought that was America.
So you left the U.S. with the riots, and then you came back to 9/11 as your reception back into
Yeah.
the U.S.
The welcome back.
I mean,
Yeah.
I can imagine what that did to your perception.
Yeah.
As far as what the U.S. is, your home country in a way. Wow. How old were you when 9/11 happened?
I was 10.
So, wow. That's a mind blowing kind of a life experience to have as far as your American experience.
So I think that largely shaped, also like the perception and the understanding of what was going on, and then you grow up hearing that your country's or, your adopted country, Mexico, is going through a lot. And I'm like, you guys are.
Yeah. Your perspective was like, no, everything was calm down there.
Here, yeah.
Here
this
is
is
this is the scary part. I can imagine that as a kid, how the perception would have been. So you come back to 9/11, basically, and you're 10. What was your youth like in the U.S.? Like growing up in the U.S. with that kind of behind you? Like, what were you like teenage years?
It was different. I mean, I think so. My first couple of years there, I didn't speak English. So a lot of it, I spent it just, being into myself and reserving. You know, I think it was a very difficult culture also to understand, because I had just come from a country that, you know, the whole community embraces you. And then we go to another country where you live in your own fence.
Yeah, it's a box.
Your own quarter. And you don't talk to your neighbors. Your neighbors don't talk to you. You do you.
Yeah.
And I think that was the most impactful thing, because it's like you automatically lose a support system.
Yeah. With my experience, I migrated to the U.S. late into my 30s, basically. And one of the first things I experienced was that the isolation aspect of it, where, you know, I know not all of the U.S. is the same, but a lot of parts are, where it's like, this is our house, this is our property. People don't say good morning, good afternoon. There is no community aspect to it, not like it is in Mexico. So yeah, it was probably very, like, it felt very isolating.
It was
not just because of the language barrier, but also because of the fact that the communities are just different.
You don't have anything anymore, and you have to rebuild it. And you know, these are people that also don't understand you, or you feel like they don't understand you, and by that virtue, you don't understand them. So I think, you know, my first couple of years were very isolated, and then of course the rebellion happens, and fuck everything, and go into the
We're talking about teenage you.
Yeah.
I mean, rebellious. Like, I grew up as a punk kid here in Tijuana. I was into punk music. My rebellion was through skateboarding and defacing public property. You know, that was most of my youth. What was it like for you out there in the United States?
Very similar. Defacing public property too. Yeah, actually, I got arrested for it was trespassing and vandalism as a misdemeanor.
I mean,
sorry, Mom.
we all start somewhere, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, all of that, for me, a lot of that risky behavior when you were a kid does build something in you, a character. You know, you're a risk taker. I mean, it might be not something you would advise a kid to do, but you know, dangerous, unsupervised freedom at that age teaches you a lot of lessons.
It does.
And stupidity gets corrected quickly. You know.
It does.
And people that don't go through that tend to have some of those issues later on in life when it's really serious, when you're really into it. That's an interesting...
Yeah, you need to let it out.
Yeah.
I was lucky my record got expunged.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you are very lucky.
Yeah.
Rebellious youth, punk, defacing public property.
Yeah.
A few problems probably along the way.
Yeah, you feel misunderstood. I mean, it's kind of the narrative for all the youth, right? You feel like authority is somehow impeding you from, you know, being you. And because, you know, also at that time it was, you know, the Iraq War, and it was very politicized. And, you know, I also didn't really understand what was going on. You know, why do we hate them? And why do they hate us? You know, and this narrative that's formed around it, I found it to be very intriguing.
Yeah.
And, you know, that also got me to be very interested in other cultures and other, you know, religions and other people. And, you know, there's also that resistance to it. It's like, you know.
So from that youth, did that give you direction as far as you then saying, you know what? I think I want to know what I do, what I want to do with the rest of my life. Like if your life was a comic book story, like what was the radioactive spider that bit you, basically?
Yeah, I think, you know, my superhero would have been just a stone rolling around collecting moss.
It's a rolling stone.
Yeah, to be honest, it was, you know, a lot of that experience was just trying a lot of shit.
Yeah.
Was just getting involved in a lot. You know, I didn't really want to spend a lot of time at home. And so that just got me involved into anything that I could. Sports, clubs, you know, friends, just watching my friends practice band or their friend, you know, the garage band. And, you know, through that, I got interested in politics, mainly hating on politics and being good at debating that. So my superhero would have definitely been just, you know, talking to people. Also, I was really interested in people's stories. I thought that learning from someone was always so intriguing and always complemented something. And learning from their perspective really, you know, helped to inform my perspective. I'm like, oh, I never really thought about it like that. That's
Yeah.
really interesting. Oh, but then tell me about this. And it always just created an environment of just wanting to know why.
So inquisitive.
Yeah, and
Just
wanting to know more. Tell me more, and tell
Yeah.
me why.
Yeah.
Um,
So you go into this inquisitive, asking questions, doubting things, being
Just annoying.
skeptical, annoying,
Just annoying everyone.